The door to the cabin opened at dusk, just as the last sliver of sun bled into the pines. Ella Mae Carson stood there in the snow, her boots worn through at the heels, her coat too thin for the mountain cold. No one had come to meet her. No one had asked her name at the stage stop. She'd walked the last 3 miles alone, following directions from a half-drunk logger who'd pointed vaguely west and muttered something about Ridge's place, end of the camp. The man who answered her knock filled the door frame like he'd been carved from the same wood, tall, broad-shouldered, holding a kerosene lamp that threw shadows across a face that hadn't seen a razor in days. A scar ran the length of his left wrist, pale against sun-darkened skin. He said nothing, just waited. "I need a place to sleep," Ella said, her voice steady despite the cold making her teeth want to chatter. "Just tonight, no trouble." His eyes gray as winter sky moved from her face to her threadbare coat to the single carpetbag she clutched. Still, he said nothing. "I can pay." She fumbled in her pocket, pulled out coins that had warmed against her palm during the long walk. "Not much, but—" "Keep it." His voice was low, rough from disuse. He stepped back, holding the door wider. "Come in before you freeze." The cabin smelled of wood smoke and pine resin, clean in a way that suggested a man who lived alone by choice, not circumstance. 1 room, neat as a pin, a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, though only one showed signs of use, a rifle propped by the door. The fireplace crackled with fresh logs, throwing heat that made her cold, numbed face sting. "Name's Callum Ridge," he said, setting the lamp on the table. "You?" "Ella Carson." She didn't give him the middle name May, after her grandmother, or mention she'd left off the Miss on purpose. Let him think what he wanted. He moved to a trunk at the foot of the bed, pulled out a thick wool blanket. "You take the bed. I'll take the floor by the fire." "I couldn't—" "Wasn't asking." He laid the blanket on the floorboards, then added another log to the fire. The sparks flew up the chimney like tiny orange stars. "Hungry?" Her stomach answered before she could. A long, hollow growl that made heat rise to her cheeks. When had she last eaten? Yesterday morning. Maybe before the stage left Millfield. Without waiting for an answer, he moved to the shelves along the wall, pulled down a pot. Soon the smell of beans and salt pork filled the cabin. He worked in silence, efficient movements that spoke of years cooking for himself. She watched from where she stood by the door, carpetbag still clutched tight. "Sit," he said without turning around. "You're making me nervous, hovering there like a ghost." She chose the chair facing the door. Old habits died hard and set her bag at her feet. The table was smooth pine, worn soft by use. Someone had carved initials in one corner, C.R., his, she supposed. He set a plate in front of her, beans swimming in pot liquor, a chunk of cornbread on the side. The first bite nearly made her moan. Hot food, real food, not the hardtack and jerky she'd been living on. "Slow down," he said, settling across from her with his own plate. "It's not going anywhere." She forced herself to eat slower, though her stomach cramped with want. He ate methodical, watching her without seeming to. She knew that look, measuring, calculating, wondering what kind of woman showed up at a man's door at dusk, alone, asking for shelter. "You running from something?" he asked finally. "No." The lie came easy. She'd been telling it to herself for 3 weeks now, ever since she'd left Kansas with her wedding dress still hanging in her former room. "Just heading west. Heard there was work in the lumber camps, cooking, mending." His eyes stayed on her face. "Broken Pines, no place for a woman alone. Rough men, rough ways." "I can handle myself." "That's so." He leaned back, chair creaking. "You ever shoot that pistol you got tucked in your coat?" Her hand twitched toward the pocket where the little derringer rested. She hadn't realized he'd noticed. Once or twice. "Hit anything?" "What I aimed at." The corner of his mouth lifted not quite a smile, but close. "Good." They finished eating in silence. She helped clear the plates, though he tried to wave her off. At the wash basin, their hands brushed as she handed him a dish. His were rough, calloused, twice the size of hers. She pulled back like she'd touched a hot stove. "I'll get more wood," he said, and disappeared out the door. Alone, she studied the cabin closer. No woman's touch anywhere, no curtains, no flowers, no softness. But clean, everything in its place. A Bible on the shelf, spine cracked from use, a photograph tucked behind it, edges showing. She didn't look closer. Whatever ghosts Callum Ridge lived with were his business. He came back with an armload of split pine, stacked it neat by the fireplace. "Storm coming," he said. "Might be here more than one night. I'll move on tomorrow. If you can, these mountain storms don't much care about your plans." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion hit her like a hammer. Her feet throbbed in her broken boots. Her shoulders ached from carrying the carpet bag. When had she last slept in a real bed? "Go on," he said, nodding toward the bed. "I've slept on harder ground than this." The bed was narrow, meant for one, with a corn husk mattress that rustled when she sat. She unlaced her boots, wincing as she pulled them off. Her stockings were more whole than fabric. "There's water in the pitcher," he said, not looking at her. "Soap, too." She washed her face and hands, the cold water shocking her more awake. In the small mirror above the basin, she barely recognized herself. Hollow cheeks, dark circles, hair that had lost its shine. 3 weeks on the road had carved away the soft Kansas girl she'd been. Good. That girl had been weak. Trusting. This one would be different. When she turned back, he'd already stretched out by the fire. Back to her, blanket pulled up, the rifle lay within arm's reach. "Thank you," she said to his back, "for this." "Get some sleep." She lay down fully clothed, coat still on. The bed smelled of pine needles and lye soap, clean, male scents that should have made her nervous. Instead, her eyes grew heavy watching the fire shadows dance on the wall. "Callum, that scar on your wrist, how'd you get it?" Silence stretched so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Bear trap, long time ago." "Did you sleep?" "Ella Carson, questions can wait for daylight." She pulled the blanket up to her chin. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The first snow began to fall, soft as whispers against the glass. Tomorrow she'd move on, find work, start over. Tonight, she was warm and fed and safe, or as safe as a woman could be in a stranger's cabin at the edge of nowhere. Just before sleep took her, she heard him shift by the fire, heard him murmur something too low to catch. A prayer, maybe, or a promise. Either way, she let the sound of his breathing blend with the crackle of the fire, let it lull her into the first real sleep she'd had since leaving everything behind. The storm hit full force around midnight. She woke once to howling wind and snow beating against the walls. He was sitting up, feeding the fire, rifle across his knees. Watching. Waiting. She should have been afraid. Instead, she closed her eyes and slept deeper than she had in years. The morning came gray and bitter. Snow piled knee-deep against the door. Ella woke to find herself alone in the cabin. The fire burned down to coals. Her coat had been replaced sometime in the night with a heavy wool blanket that smelled of cedar and wood smoke. She sat up, disoriented, listening to the silence. The door opened on a blast of cold air. Callum stomped in, snow clinging to his shoulders, carrying an armload of wood. He glanced at her once, then went about rebuilding the fire as if she wasn't there. "Storm's not letting up," he said finally. "Trail's blocked. You're not going anywhere today." She swung her legs off the bed, wincing as her feet touched the cold floor. "I can't impose." "You can and you will." He didn't look at her, focused on coaxing flame from the embers. "Unless you'd rather freeze to death trying to wade through 6-foot drifts." She watched him work, noting the practiced efficiency of his movements. Everything about this man was controlled, deliberate, no wasted motion, no unnecessary words, the opposite of Harold back in Kansas, who'd filled every silence with chatter about crop yields and which families were feuding and how many head of cattle his father owned. "Coffee?" Callum asked, already pouring 2 cups from the pot he'd set on the fire grate. "Thank you." She wrapped her hands around the tin cup, let the heat seep into her bones. The coffee was black as tar, strong enough to float a horseshoe. Perfect. They sat at the table, him reading a week-old newspaper, her pretending she wasn't studying every detail of the cabin. No photographs except that one hidden behind the Bible. No letters on the mantel, no mementos. A man determined to live without a past. "You sleep all right?" he asked, without looking up from his paper. "Yes, thank you for the extra blanket." "You were shivering." So he had been watching her sleep. She should have felt violated, threatened. Instead, she felt protected. It was an unfamiliar sensation. "I can cook," she offered. "Earn my keep while I'm here." "No need. I don't take charity." Now he did look up, those gray eyes sharp. "It's not charity, it's common decency. Man doesn't turn a woman out in a blizzard." "Some would." "I'm not some." They stared at each other across the table. She looked away first, unsettled by the steadiness of his gaze. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows in their frames. "There's books," he said, nodding toward the shelf. "If you get bored." She spent the morning reading while he worked on repairing a broken harness. The books surprised her poetry mixed with practical guides. A volume of Shakespeare next to a treatise on livestock management. The margins of some were filled with notes in a careful hand. She couldn't imagine this taciturn man pondering Hamlet's soliloquies. Lunch was simple beans again. Hardtack, dried apple slices he produced from a tin. They ate in companionable silence, the storm creating a wall between them and the outside world. She helped clean up despite his protests, their movements around each other careful, maintaining distance. "Why broken pine?" she asked as she dried the plates. "Work steady. People leave you alone." "That's important to you, being left alone." He hung the pot on its hook, back to her. "Sometimes." She wanted to ask more, but his tone didn't invite questions. She understood that. There were things she didn't want to talk about, either Harold's hands getting too familiar, his mother calling her wild and unsuitable, the night she'd finally fought back and earned a reputation that followed her like a shadow. The afternoon stretched long. She mended a tear in her coat while he sharpened tools. The scratch of needle through fabric and the whisper of steel on whetstone created their own rhythm. Once, she caught him watching her, but he looked away quick as a startled deer. "You sew well," he observed. "My grandmother taught me. Said a woman should be able to mend anything: clothes, wounds, broken things." Smart woman. "She was." Ella tied off the thread, bit it clean. "Died when I was 15. Things might have been different if she'd lived." "How so?" She shrugged. "She understood me, didn't try to force me into a mold I couldn't fit." "And others did. Others tried." He set down the axe he'd been working on, gave her his full attention. "That why you're really here, someone trying to force you into something?" The truth pushed at her teeth, wanting out, but she'd learned to swallow truth like bitter medicine. "I told you, looking for work." "Uh-huh." He picked up the axe again. "Well, there's the Garrison place, might need a cook, but they've got 6 sons, all of them trouble." "I can handle trouble." "The Mackeys need someone to help with laundry, but Mrs. Mackey's particular about who she hires. Wants references." "I see." "Then there's the saloon. They're always—" "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "Not that—" He studied her again with those 2 knowing eyes. "All right." Evening came early, the storm turning day to twilight by 4 o'clock. He made dinner venison stew from meat he'd hung in the lean-to. She watched him cook, noted how he kept everything within arm's reach, How he positioned himself to see the door while he worked. Old habits, like hers. You weren't always a logger, she said. He stirred the pot, considering no. Soldier, among other things. And now I cut trees and mind my business. After dinner, he pulled out a deck of cards. You play poker. Thought maybe something tamer, rummy. She smiled despite herself. Afraid I'll clean you out. Afraid you'll try. They played by lamplight while the storm raged. He was good, strategic, patient. But she'd learned cards from her grandmother, who'd learned from a riverboat gambler before she'd settled down to respectability. That's 3 hands to me, she said, laying down her cards. You hustled me. You assumed I couldn't play. Lesson learned. He gathered the cards, shuffled smooth as silk. Your deal. She won 2 more hands before he caught on to her tells. Then it became a real game, each watching the other for signs, for weaknesses, the kind of careful dance she'd been doing all day, but with cards as proxies. Why aren't you married? She asked, dealing the next hand. His hand stilled on his cards. Who says I'm not? She gestured around the cabin. No woman would let you live like this. Like what? Like you're camping instead of living. Like you might need to leave at any moment. He picked up his cards, arranged them with deliberate care. Maybe that's how I prefer it. Maybe. She drew a card, discarded. Or maybe you're running from something too. I'm not running. Then what do you call this? She waved at the bare walls, the sparse furnishings. This isn't a home, it's a hiding place. His jaw tightened. Play your cards, Miss Carson. She'd pushed too far, but that was always her problem, not knowing when to stop, when to let things be. It's what had gotten her branded as difficult, unsuitable, too much trouble for any decent man to take on. They finished the hand in silence. He won, barely, and she suspected he'd let her see him considering his discards longer than necessary. A kindness disguised as strategy. I should bed down, she said, pushing back from the table. Take the bed again. Storm might last another day or 2. I can't keep taking your bed. You can, and you will. He was already pulling out the blankets for his pallet by the fire. No sense arguing what's already decided. She wanted to protest, but exhaustion tugged at her. The day of enforced inactivity had been more tiring than a day of hard travel. Too much time to think, to remember why she was here in the first place. She prepared for bed while he banked the fire, back turned to give her privacy. The small courtesy touched her more than grand gestures would have. She'd known men who'd promised her the moon. This one just quietly offered respect. Callum, thank you for not asking questions. He settled onto his pallet, pulling the blanket up. Everyone's got things they'd rather not discuss. Even you. Especially me. She lay in the dark, listening to the storm and his breathing. The fire popped and settled. Wind found every crack in the walls, whistling its lonesome song. But inside was warm and safe, a temporary haven from whatever waited beyond the storm. That photograph behind your Bible, she said into the darkness. Is she why you live alone? Silence stretched so long she thought he'd fallen asleep or chosen not to answer. Then, quiet as snow falling. Yes. She didn't ask more. Some wounds didn't bear examining. She knew that better than most. Instead, she turned toward the wall and let sleep take her, wondering if all broken things found their way to broken pine, and if any of them ever healed. In the morning, the storm would break or it wouldn't. She'd move on or she'd stay another day. But tonight, in this bare cabin with this silent man keeping watch, she felt something she hadn't felt in months safe. Not just from the storm, or from Harold, or from the whispers that had driven her west. Safe from the crushing weight of being alone in a world that had no place for women who couldn't bend. Tomorrow would bring its own troubles. Tonight, she slept. The storm broke on the 3rd morning, leaving the world wrapped in white silence. Ella stood at the window, watching the sun turn snow to diamonds, when Callum came up beside her. "It trails should be passable by noon," he said, "if you're set on leaving." She nodded, though something in her chest tightened at the thought. "I've imposed enough." "You haven't imposed." He turned away, busying himself with the coffee pot. "But town folks will talk if they know you've been here. 3 days in a man's cabin, that's enough to ruin what reputation you've got left." The words stung because they were true. She'd fled Kansas to escape one scandal only to court another. "I'll say I stayed at the boarding house. Mrs. Henley, who runs it, has a memory like a steel trap and a tongue like a telegraph wire. She'll know you weren't there." Ella sank into the chair, suddenly weary. Every door led to another wall. "Then what do you suggest?" "Stay. Let them talk. In a month they'll have something new to gossip about." "Easy for you to say. Men don't get branded." "No," he agreed quietly. "We just get other kinds of scars." By afternoon, she'd made her decision. The Garrison Ranch needed a cook, 6 sons or no 6 sons. She'd faced worse than ranch hands. Callum walked her down the mountain, breaking trail through the fresh snow, her carpet bag slung over his shoulder. They didn't speak much on the journey. Words seemed unnecessary when the world was so hushed and white. But when they reached the edge of town, where smoke rose from chimneys and dogs barked in yards, he stopped. "The Garrisons are decent people," he said. "But if you have trouble, any kind of trouble, you come find me. I can take care of myself." "I know you can." He handed her the carpet bag. "Offer stands anyway." She watched him trudge back up the trail, broad shoulders disappearing into the pines. Then she squared her own shoulders and headed for Main Street. The town of Broken Pines sprawled along a single muddy thoroughfare general store, saloon, boarding house, church. Men hauling logs stopped to stare. Women pulling children along whispered behind gloved hands. By the time she reached the general store, she felt like a carnival exhibit. "Help you," the shopkeeper, a thin man with suspicious eyes, looked her up and down. "I need directions to the Garrison Ranch." "That's so, you got business there." "I heard they need a cook." His expression shifted from suspicious to knowing. "You're the woman stayed up at Ridge's cabin." It wasn't a question. She kept her face neutral. "Mr. Ridge was kind enough to offer shelter during the storm." 3 days of shelter. Way I heard it." "The storm lasted 3 days." "Uh-huh." He leaned on the counter, picking his teeth with a splinter. "Don't reckon Mrs. Garrison will hire a woman of questionable character. She's particular about influences around her boys." Heat crept up Ella's neck. "My character is not—" "Lady, you stayed unchaperoned with a man known to keep to himself. Draw your own conclusions about what folks will think." The bell above the door chimed. A woman entered, middle-aged, well-dressed, with the kind of face that had seen enough of life to judge it fairly. She took in Ella, the shopkeeper's smirk, the tension thick as molasses. Mr. Putnam," the woman said coolly. "Are you providing directions or just gossip?" The shopkeeper straightened. "Afternoon. Mrs. Hartwell, I heard what you were just—" She turned to Ella. "You're the young woman looking for work." "Yes, ma'am. I'm Martha Hartwell. My husband's the doctor here. Walk with me." Outside, Mrs. Hartwell set a brisk pace toward the boarding house. "Don't mind Putnam. He's got the moral backbone of a wet noodle and the brain to match. You stayed with Callum Ridge." "Yes, ma'am. The storm." "I don't need explanations. Callum's a good man. Better than most in this town deserve." She glanced sideways at Ella. "He tell you about his wife?" "No, ma'am." "Figured not. Man holds his pain close. Lost her and the baby 5 years back. Fever took them while he was away working. He blames himself, though Lord knows there wasn't anything could have been done." Ella thought of the photograph hidden behind the Bible. the careful emptiness of the cabin. That's why he lives alone. That's why he punishes himself, more like. Martha stopped in front of the boarding house. Now, the garrison's already hired a cook last week, but I could use help with my work. I assist my husband with doctoring, and these old hands aren't as steady as they used to be. Work's hard, sometimes ugly, but it's honest, and I don't give two figs what the gossips say. I thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. Can you handle bloodsick folks' death? Ella thought of her grandmother, wasting away while she'd held the basin, changed the sheets, spooned broth between cracked lips. Yes. Good. Room and board plus $2 a week, Sundays off, and Miss Carson. Martha's eyes sharpened. Whatever you're running from, it's your business, but if it follows you here and brings harm to my patients, we'll have words. Clear. Clear. Then come along, Mrs. Henley's soup is terrible, but it's hot. The boarding house dining room went silent when they entered. 6 women at the long table, all eyes on Ella like hawks eyeing a rabbit. Martha sailed through the scrutiny like a ship through fog. Ladies, she announced, this is Miss Carson. She'll be working with me at the surgery. I trust you'll make her welcome. The woman from Ridge's cabin, this from a pinched-faced matron at the head of the table. The woman caught in the storm, who was fortunate enough to find shelter, Martha corrected. Unless you'd have preferred she freeze to death for propriety's sake. Mrs. Crane. Mrs. Crane flushed. Well, I never... No, you never do. That's the problem. Martha guided Ella to a seat. Miss Carson, may I present our town's social committee? They'll have you cataloged, categorized, and condemned before the soup course. A younger woman across the table giggled, then caught herself. She had kind eyes and ink-stained fingers. I'm Abigail Morse. I help at the school. Pleased to meet you, Ella managed. Don't let them frighten you, Abigail whispered as bowls were passed. They're more bark than bite, mostly. Dinner was an interrogation disguised as conversation. Where was she from, Kansas? She said, keeping it vague. Did she have family, none living? What brought her west opportunity? Each answer was weighed, measured, found wanting. And Mr. Ridge was a perfect gentleman. Mrs. Crane pressed. Perfect, Ella confirmed. He slept by the fire. I took the bed. For 3 nights. The storm lasted 3 days. Still, a young woman, an unmarried man. Surely you can see how it appears. Ella set down her spoon carefully. What I see, Mrs. Crane, is that I'm alive instead of frozen in a drift somewhere. If that offends your sensibilities, I apologize, but I won't apologize for surviving. Silence. Then Martha laughed, bright as bells. Well said. Now, who wants to tell Miss Carson about the church social next week? The conversation shifted, but Ella felt the undercurrents. She was marked now the woman with a past, the one who'd stayed with Ridge, the one who didn't apologize. In Kansas, such a reputation had driven her away. Here, she'd have to find a way to live with it. After dinner, Abigail showed her to a small room under the eaves. Don't mind Mrs. Crane. Her daughter ran off with a traveling salesman last year, so she sees fallen women everywhere. And I'm fallen. Abigail shrugged. You're interesting. In Broken Pine, that's almost the same thing. She paused at the door. Callum Ridge is a good man. Whatever they say. Remember that. Alone, Ella unpacked her few belongings. 3 dresses, all mended, her grandmother's Bible, the Derringer, which she tucked under the pillow. From the window, she could see the mountain trail leading up to Callum's cabin. Was he there now, alone with his ghosts and his guilt? A knock interrupted her thoughts. Martha entered with an armload of supplies. These are for tomorrow. We've got the Turner boy with a broken arm and Mrs. Patterson's baby due any day. Can you start at dawn? Yes, ma'am. Good. Martha set down the supplies, then studied Ella with those knowing eyes. Folks will talk, they always do, but talk fades. What matters is the work you do, the person you are when no one's watching. And if they never stop talking, then you learn not to listen. Martha moved to the door, then paused. Callum Ridge doesn't let people close. The fact he let you stay says something. Don't know what yet, but something. After she left, Ella sat on the narrow bed, listening to the sounds of town settling for the night. Somewhere out there, people were discussing her over dinner tables and whiskey glasses. The woman from nowhere. Ridge's woman, some would say. Though nothing had happened between them except silence and snow and the strange comfort of existing in the same space without demands. Tomorrow she'd start her new life. Again, she'd bind wounds and birth babies, and slowly, maybe, the talk would fade, or it wouldn't, and she'd learn to live with that too. But tonight, she thought of a cabin in the pines, a man who slept on the floor to give her his bed, the way safety felt like strong coffee and silence. She'd thought she was running toward something coming west. Now she wondered if she'd just been running until she found a place to stop. Broken Pine would be that place, she decided. Whatever it cost her, whatever people said. She'd build something here, not the life Kansas had wanted to force on her, but something real and honest and hers. And maybe, when the talk died down and the snow melted and spring came to the mountains, she'd climb that trail again, just to thank him properly, just to see if his eyes still reminded her of winter skies, just to see if he still stood guard against the darkness, alone. 2 weeks into her new life, Ella discovered a rhythm. Dawn at the surgery, tending whoever needed tending, afternoons helping Martha mix medicines and roll bandages, evenings at the boarding house, deflecting barbs disguised as concern. She'd grown armor against the whispers, though some nights she lay awake feeling their weight. Then came the morning she found fresh split wood stacked neat beside the surgery's back door. "Who left this?" she asked Martha. The older woman glanced out, smiled knowingly. "Could be anyone, though not many folks split wood so precise. Each piece exact same size." Ella ran her fingers over the smooth-cut ends. She knew those axe marks, that methodical precision, but he hadn't come to the door, hadn't left word, just wood to keep the surgery warm. It became a pattern. Every few days, something would appear. Wood. A sack of cornmeal when supplies ran low. Once, a bundle of evergreen boughs that made the surgery smell like the mountain. Never a note. Never a footprint she could follow. Like he was still watching out for her from a distance, the way he'd watched that first night from his place by the fire. She started watching for him in town, catching glimpses, his broad back disappearing into the general store, his horse tied outside the blacksmith's. But he never came to the surgery, never sought her out. The restraint of it made her chest tight in ways she didn't examine too close. "You could thank him," Martha suggested one afternoon as they cleaned instruments. "Man's been leaving gifts like a shy schoolboy. He doesn't want thanks. If he did, he'd knock. Maybe he's waiting for an invitation." Ella scrubbed harder at a stubborn spot. Or maybe he's smart enough to know the talk would get worse if he came calling. "Since when do you care about talk?" Since always, Ella thought but didn't say. Since Harold's mother had called her wild. Since the church ladies had tisked over her split skirts for riding. Since she'd bloodied Harold's nose for putting hands where they weren't wanted, and become the cautionary tale mothers told their daughters. That evening, she made a decision. After supper, while the boarding house ladies gathered for their sewing circle, she slipped out the back. The moon was high. The path up the mountain silver bright with frost. Her breath clouded in the cold as she climbed. The cabin windows glowed warm. Smoke rose straight in the still air. She knocked before she could lose nerve. He opened the door already dressed for weather, like he'd been about to leave, or like he'd seen her coming up the trail. His eyes widened slightly, the only sign of surprise. "Miss Carson." "Mr. Ridge." She held up the basket she'd brought. I thought I should return the favor. Cornbread, though it seems silly now, bringing cornmeal to a man who's been leaving sacks of it at my door. The corner of his mouth lifted. Wasn't me. No. Must be someone else splitting wood in identical lengths and happening to know when the surgery's running low on supplies. Must be. She shifted the basket. May I come in? Or would you prefer I leave this on the step like a mysterious benefactor? He stepped aside. The cabin looked exactly as she remembered, sparse, clean, everything in its place. Except now there was a second chair at the table. New made, fresh wood still pale. You made another chair. Seemed foolish having just one. He took the basket, set it on the table. Coffee. Please. They sat across from each other like before, but everything felt different. She wasn't a desperate stranger seeking shelter. He wasn't a man resigned to intrusion. They were what the question hung between them like morning mist. How's the doctoring work? He asked. Good. Hard. Mrs. Patterson had her baby last week. Breech birth. But we managed. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Martha's teaching me things my grandmother never could. Proper medicines instead of just herb knowledge. She's a good woman. She is fair, too. Doesn't care what people say about me. His jaw tightened. They giving you trouble? No more than expected. Mrs. Crane crosses the street when she sees me. Some of the men make comments. Nothing I haven't heard before. Names. The quiet menace in that single word made her look up. His face was calm, but his knuckles were white around his cup. It doesn't matter. It does to me. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why does it matter to you what people say about a woman you barely know? He set down his cup carefully. You know why. Did she? She knew the way her pulse jumped when she spotted him in town. Knew how she'd memorized the sound of his voice in just 3 days. Knew that she felt safer in his presence than she'd felt anywhere since her grandmother died. But knowing and understanding were different things. The talk will get worse if you defend me, she said softly. Don't care about talk. You should. You live here. Work here. So do you now. She stood, needing movement. The cabin felt smaller with both of them in it, like the walls had drawn close. She touched the books on his shelf, the Bible that hid his grief. Tell me about her. He was quiet so long she thought he'd refuse. Then, Sarah. Her name was Sarah. Met her in Missouri when I was driving cattle. Married her quick. Brought her here. She hated it at first, too rough, too cold. But she made it home. Made me believe I could be more than just another drifter. Ella turned. He was staring at his hands, seeing past instead of present. I was gone when the fever came, logging camp up north, trying to earn extra for the baby. By the time word reached me, he spread his hands. Doc Hartwell did everything he could. Wasn't enough. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it I brought her here, left her alone? A man protects what's his, and I failed. You couldn't have known, but I did know. Knew she wasn't strong. Knew town was too far if trouble came. Chose money over staying close. He looked up finally, eyes dark with old pain. That's why I understood when you showed up. Could see you were running from something that wasn't your fault, but you blamed yourself anyway. We recognize our own kind. She moved without thinking, laid her hand over his on the table. His skin was rough, warm, alive. We're not our worst moments. Aren't we? No, we're what we do after. We're how we go on. He turned his hand, laced their fingers together. Such a simple thing, holding hands. But her heart hammered like she'd run up the mountain instead of walked. Why did you really come tonight? He asked. To thank you for the wood. Told you, wasn't me. Liar. She squeezed his hand. And to see if you'd built another chair. And because I'm tired of being careful. Tired of calculating every move to minimize talk? They'll gossip anyway. Might as well give them something worth discussing. That what this is, giving them something to discuss. She met his eyes steady. No, this is me being honest, which is apparently another thing that makes me unsuitable. Ella. Her name and his voice did things to her composure. You don't know what you're risking. Don't I? My reputation's already ruined. What else can they take? Your work, Martha's standing, the life you're building here. And if I decide it's worth it? He stood abruptly, pulled his hand free, paced to the window like he had that first night. You don't understand. I can't be what you might need. Sarah knew that eventually. The silence, the moods. I'm better alone. Are you? Or is that just what you tell yourself because it's easier than trying again? He turned on her then, eyes fierce. You've been here 2 weeks. You don't know. I know you couldn't sleep that first night until you'd given me your bed and your warm blanket. I know you watch for my safety, even when you won't speak to me in town. I know you made another chair even while telling yourself you prefer being alone. She stepped closer. I know loneliness when I see it. Callum Ridge. Been wearing it like skin most of my life. They stood frozen, a foot apart. The air between them charged like lightning fixing to strike. She could see his pulse beating hard in his throat, could feel her own matching it. I should go, she whispered. Yes. Neither moved. Just sleeping, no trouble, she said, echoing that first night. That's what I promised. Didn't I? His laugh was soft, pained. You've been trouble since the moment you knocked. Known it soon as I opened that door. Should have left me in the snow then. Should have? His hand came up, hovered near her cheek without touching. Couldn't. The almost touch burned more than contact would have. She swayed toward him, drawn like a moth to flame. But he stepped back, let his hand fall. Go home, Ella, before we both do something that can't be undone. She nodded, throat tight, gathered her dignity and her empty basket. At the door, she paused. The chair. When you made it, who were you thinking would sit there? He didn't answer, but his silence said enough. She left him standing in the lamplight and made her way down the mountain. The moon had set, leaving only stars to guide her. In the darkness, she could pretend the moisture on her cheeks was just cold air making her eyes water. Back at the boarding house, she slipped in quiet as she'd left. But Mrs. Crane was waiting in the parlor, triumph glittering in her eyes. Pleasant walk, Miss Carson. Ella lifted her chin. Very. Up the mountain. Perhaps I saw which direction you headed. The night air clears the head. Indeed. And was Mr. Ridge's air particularly clearing? So it would be war then. Fine. She'd fought harder battles with less armor. Good night, Mrs. Crane. But as she climbed the stairs, she felt the weight of what she'd set in motion. Tomorrow the whispers would be louder, the looks sharper, the price of that almost touch, that chair made for someone not quite hoped for, would come due. She touched her cheek where his hand hadn't quite landed. Worth it, she decided. Whatever came next, that moment of standing close enough to share breath, to see his walls crack just a little worth every word they'd say. In her narrow bed, she dreamed of strong hands splitting wood into precise lengths, of a man standing guard against the dark, of 2 chairs at a table waiting to be filled, and somewhere up the mountain. She wondered if he dreamed too, or if he sat awake feeding the fire, adding up the cost of letting someone close enough to hurt. Either way, something had shifted tonight. The careful distance he'd maintained was breached. The question now was whether either of them was brave enough to cross the space that remained. The stranger arrived on the Tuesday stage, dressed too fine for Broken Pine in a city-cut coat and polished boots that had never seen honest mud. Ella was at the general store buying bandages when she heard his voice smooth as oil, twice as slippery. I'm looking for a woman. About yay high, dark hair, goes by Ella Carson, though that might not be the name you know her by." Her blood turned to ice water. She knew that voice, that practiced charm that masked something rotten underneath. Roy Kendall, Harold's cousin, the one who'd tried to corner her in the barn last spring, who'd laughed when she'd fought him off and promised she'd regret making him look foolish. "Can't say I know anyone by that description," Putnam was saying, though his eyes darted toward where Ella stood frozen behind the fabric bolts. Really, because the stage driver said he remembered a woman matching her looks getting off here about a month back, during that big storm. Ella forced herself to move casual-like toward the door, but Roy had positioned himself to see the whole store. His eyes found her, and his smile spread like spilled molasses. "Why, Miss Ella, fancy meeting you here." She lifted her chin, hand moving instinctive to her coat pocket where the derringer rested. "Mr. Kendall. Now, is that any way to greet family, or would have been family, if you hadn't run off like a thief in the night?" He strolled closer, and she smelled the pomade in his hair, the whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. "Harold's been beside himself. His mother, too, very concerned about your welfare." "I'm sure they are." "They sent me to bring you home, make things right. Harold's still willing to marry you, despite everything." "How generous of him." Roy's eyes narrowed at her tone. "You always were too sharp-tongued for your own good, but that can be fixed. Harold's mother knows ways to gentle a fractious mare." "I'm not a horse, Mr. Kendall, and I'm not going anywhere with you. Aren't you?" He leaned against the counter, playing to the gathering audience. "Folks here know what kind of woman you are, know why you really left Kansas." Putnam perked up like a hound on scent. Two women examining ribbons stopped pretending to shop. The tension in the store stretched tight as wet leather. "They know enough," Ella said. "Do they know about the stable boy, what you two were caught doing?" Heat flooded her face. "That's a lie, and you know it. Thomas was helping me saddle my horse." "Your version of events." "My version, I'm not the one who bloodied a respectable man's nose. Not the one who threatened him with a pitchfork when he tried to court her proper." "Court," the word exploded from her. "Is that what you call cornering a woman alone and putting your hands?" Now. His smile widened. "Let's not be crude. Ladies shouldn't speak of such things." The shop bell chimed. Callum filled the doorway, taking in the scene with one sweep of those gray eyes. He'd been hauling wood sawdust clung to his clothes. His hands were gloveless despite the cold. His gaze settled on Roy, and something dangerous flickered across his face. "Morning, Ella. This man bothering you?" "Just catching up with Miss Carson," Roy said, straightening. He had 4 inches and 40 pounds on most men, but Callum made him look soft. "I'm Roy Kendall, her fiancé's cousin. Come to escort her home where she belongs." "That so?" Callum moved into the store, deliberate as a stalking cat. "Funny, lady says she's not going anywhere." "The lady doesn't always know what's best for her. Wild spirits need firm guidance." Callum's hands flexed at his sides. "In my experience, a man who has to force a woman's company isn't much of a man at all." Roy's face darkened. "And what would you know about it? Woodcutter." "This is family business." "She's not your family." "Not yet, but Harold's claim—" "Harold has no claim here." Callum's voice was quiet, final. "Neither do you." "We'll see about that." Roy turned back to Ella. "You've got 1 day to pack. I've taken a room at the boarding house. Yes, the same one where you're staying. We'll have plenty of time to discuss your future, privately." He tipped his hat to the watching women, nodded to Putnam. "I'll take a tin of tobacco, best you have." After he left, the silence in the store was thick enough to cut. Ella felt every eye on her, calculating this new information against old gossip. "I should go," she said to no one in particular. "I'll walk you." Callum took her basket, his hand brushing hers. The simple touch steadied her. "Outside, away from curious ears?" he asked. How much of that was true? Does it matter? Not to me, but you're shaking. She looked down at her hands. He was right. The stable boy Thomas, he's simple-minded but kind. Roy found us in the stable and made it sound. Thomas was just helping me, that's all. And the bloodied nose. That part was true. She managed a weak smile. Also, the pitchfork. Good girl. They walked in silence until they reached the surgery. Martha was out on calls, leaving them alone. Callum set down her basket, then surprised her by taking both her hands in his. Pack your things, he said. You're not staying at that boarding house tonight? Where would I go? My place. Callum, no, the talk is bad enough. Hang the talk. You think I'd leave you there with him down the hall? His grip tightened. Man like that, locked doors don't mean much. She knew he was right, knew Roy, knew what he was capable of when crossed. But I can't just move into your cabin. It would ruin us both. Then marry me. The words fell between them like dropped china. She stared at him, sure she'd misheard. What? Marry me. He said it steadier this time. Jaw set. Today, now. Then he's got no claim, no argument. You'd be protected. Callum? Her throat felt full of stones. You can't just... You don't propose to save someone from scandal. Don't I? It's not fair to you, to Sarah's memory. Something shifted in his face. Sarah would have liked you, would have understood doing what needs doing to keep someone safe. He released her hands, stepped back. Think about it. I'll be at the church come sunset. If you're there, we'll make it legal. If not, I'll find another way to keep him from you. He left before she could respond. She stood in the empty surgery, mind spinning. Marry Callum Ridge. Share that cabin, that life he'd built in careful isolation. Wake to his silences. Sleep knowing he was standing guard. It was madness. It was also, maybe, salvation. Martha returned to find her still standing there, staring at nothing. Heard there was quite a scene at Putnam's, the older woman said. Roy Kendall making claims on you. He says Harold sent him, that they'll take me back regardless of what I want. And Callum offered protection. Ella looked up sharp. How did you... Girl, that man's been protecting you since the day you arrived. Think I don't know who really pays for those medicines you give to families who can't afford them, who makes sure you always have wood, food, whatever you need. Martha studied her with knowing eyes. Question is, what are you going to do about it? He asked me to marry him. Smart man. It's not... We barely know each other. You know enough. Know he's decent, hard-working, trustworthy. Know he looks at you like you're water and he's been thirsting for years. Martha moved to the medicine cabinet, began organizing already organized bottles. I married Doc after knowing him 2 weeks. Been 30 years now. Sometimes you just recognize home when you see it. Home. Was that what Callum was? That cabin in the pines, that careful man with his deep silences and small kindnesses. I should pack, Ella said quietly. Yes, Martha agreed. You should. At the boarding house, Mrs. Crane was holding court in the parlor, Roy at the center of her attention, quite worried about her state of mind. He was saying, running off like that, taking up with strangers, not like the sweet girl Harold courted at all. Mr. Kendall, Ella stood in the doorway, back straight. Might I have a word? Of course. My dear, ladies, if you'll excuse us. Mrs. Crane looked ready to plant roots, but Martha appeared behind Ella. Come along, Constance. Let's give them privacy. When they were alone, Roy's mask dropped. You've caused a lot of trouble. Ella, made Harold look the fool, made me travel all this way. I'll reimburse your stage fare if you leave tonight. He laughed, moved closer. She held her ground though her skin crawled. You think you can buy me off after what you did? What I did was defend myself. You humiliated me. In front of the hands. The family. Do you know what they said, that Roy Kendall got bested by a woman with a pitchfork? His hand shot out, grabbed her wrist. That debt needs settling. And let go. Or what, you'll make another scene, ruin what little reputation you have left. His grip tightened. I saw how that woodcutter looked at you. Sweet on you. Isn't he be a shame if something happened to him? Accidents happen in lumber camps all the time. You threaten him and You'll what? He pulled her closer, breath hot on her face. You've got no power here. Ella, no family, no standing. Just the charity of strangers who'll drop you quick when they learn what you really are. And what's that? A tease who leads men on, then cries foul when they take what's offered. She jerked free, stumbled back. I never offered you anything. Didn't you all those smiles at dinner, those rides where you'd let your skirts blow up? I was kind to you because you were Harold's cousin, that's all. Kind. He spat the word. We'll see how kind you feel tomorrow when we're on the stage back to Kansas. He left her standing there, fists clenched, breath coming hard. Outside, dusk was falling. Soon Callum would be at the church, waiting to see if she'd choose the protection he offered. Marriage without love. Just practical necessity. Except, was it without love? She thought of his hands splitting wood in precise lengths, of the second chair he'd made while telling himself he preferred solitude. Thought of how he'd stood between her and Roy without hesitation, how he'd offered his name like armor against the world. Maybe love wasn't always declarations and flowers. Maybe sometimes it was just showing up, day after day, standing guard, building furniture for a future you were afraid to want. She climbed the stairs to pack, mind made up. Behind her, she heard Roy's laughter from the parlor, heard him charming the boarding house ladies with lies dressed as concern. Tomorrow he'd wake to find her gone, find her wearing another man's name, protected by law and by a husband who understood that sometimes salvation came in unexpected forms. At sunset, she'd be at the church, and Callum Ridge, that careful, silent man who'd opened his door to a stranger in a storm, would be waiting. The storm came sudden that night, rolling down from the mountains like God's own fury. Rain turned to sleet, then back to rain, hammering the cabin roof like fists. Ella woke to thunder that shook the walls and lightning that turned the world white bright for heartbeats at a time. She'd been married 3 days. 3 days of careful politeness, of Callum taking his old spot by the fire while she took the bed, of learning to move around each other in the small space without touching. He'd given her his name for protection, nothing more. She understood that, accepted it, but sometimes she caught him watching her with something that might have been longing, if she'd let herself believe it. Now she sat up, disoriented. The fire had died to embers. Cold seeped through every crack. And Callum, where was Callum? Lightning flashed again, showing him slumped in his chair, head tipped back, breathing rough and shallow. Even in the brief light, she could see the flush on his face, the sweat beading his forehead despite the cold. Callum! She threw off the blankets, bare feet hitting cold floor. Callum, wake up! His eyes opened, unfocused. Sarah? Her heart clenched, but she pushed past it. No, it's Ella. You're sick. Ella? He tried to sit straighter, grimaced. Sorry, didn't mean to. Thought you were. Hush. She pressed her hand to his forehead, jerked back at the heat. You're burning up. How long have you been feeling poorly? Day or two. It's nothing. Just tired from. A coughing fit cut him off, deep and rattling. That's not nothing. That's lung fever. She'd seen it before. Helped her grandmother nurse neighbors through it. Sometimes they lived. Sometimes they didn't. You need to be in bed. I'm fine here. Don't be stubborn. She tugged at his arm. Come on, up. He stood, swayed. She caught him, staggered under his weight. Lord, the man was solid as oak. Together they made it to the bed, him trying to protest the whole way. This is your bed." "Our bed," she corrected firmly. "And right now, you need it more. Lie down." He collapsed more than lay, eyes already closing again. She pulled off his boots, covered him with every blanket in the cabin. His shirt was soaked through with sweat. It needed changing, but that would mean, no. First things first. Water, willow bark tea, cool cloths for the fever. She knew what to do. Had done it before, but never alone in a cabin with the nearest help miles away through a storm. Never for someone who muttered another woman's name in his delirium. She built up the fire, set water to boil, found his store of medicinals not much, but there was willow bark, thank God. While the tea steeped, she wrung out a cloth in cool water, laid it on his forehead. His hand caught hers, grip stronger than a sick man's should be. "Don't leave." "I'm not leaving. Everyone leaves." His eyes were open but looking past her, seeing ghosts. "Sarah left the baby. Couldn't even hold her, so small. Fit in my hands like a bird." Ella's throat tightened. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Pretty lies, but his grip loosened, and he let her tend him. The night stretched endless. She bathed his face and neck, forced tea between his lips when he'd take it. He drifted in and out, sometimes knowing her, sometimes calling for Sarah, sometimes mumbling about cattle drives and card games and a dozen other fragments of his past. "Should have stayed," he said once, clear as day. "Should have been here. Man protects what's his." "You couldn't have known," she told him, same as before. "Could have, did, knew the fever was going around, chose money instead." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the guilt eating him alive. "Can't fail again, you understand? Can't lose, won't. You won't lose me." The promise came without thought. "I'm too stubborn to die of a little fever." "Not you, me. I'm the one who—" He broke off, coughing again. By dawn, his fever had climbed higher. He'd stopped making sense, stopped responding to his name. She'd changed his shirt. Embarrassment was a luxury she couldn't afford, and seen the scars marking his body. Not just the wrist, old wounds that spoke of a hard life before he'd settled here. The storm had blown itself out, leaving the world white and silent. She needed help, but she couldn't leave him. Not like this, not when he might. No, she wouldn't think it. Instead, she did what her grandmother had done when nursing seemed not enough. She talked, told him about learning to ride on her grandfather's plow horse, about the time she'd put a frog in Harold's mother's teapot, about the dreams she'd had of going west, of being someone different, someone brave. "You helped me be brave," she told his still form. "Didn't even mean to. Probably. But that first night, you just accepted me. No questions, no judgment. Just come in before you freeze." She wrung out the cloth again, noted his breathing seemed easier. "I was so scared. Callum, everything behind me ruined, everything ahead uncertain. Then you opened that door and I thought maybe I could stop running. Maybe I'd found somewhere to stand still." His fever broke near noon, sudden as summer rain. One moment burning, the next shivering as his body remembered how to regulate itself. She piled more wood on the fire, tucked the blankets higher. "Cold," he mumbled. "I know. That's good. Means the fever's passing." She smoothed his hair back, felt the normal warmth of healthy skin. "Sleep now. Real sleep." He caught her hand again, but gentle this time. "You stayed. I told you I would. Even when I called you Sarah." So he remembered that. Heat climbed her cheeks. "You were fevered, not responsible for—" "I'm sorry." "Don't be." "I am." His eyes were clearer than she'd seen them in hours. Tired, worn, but present. "You deserve better than a man who sees ghosts." "Maybe I see them too." She thought of Roy's hands on her wrists, of Harold's mother calling her ruined. Maybe that's why we recognize each other. He studied her for a long moment. Then, so soft she almost missed it. "Thank you." She stayed beside the bed while he slept. Real healing sleep now. The cabin warmed as afternoon sun broke through the clouds. Water dripped from icicles on the eaves. The world went on, and they were still in it. When he woke again, sun was slanting low through the windows. He pushed himself up, careful, testing his strength. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been dragged behind a horse." He rubbed his face, grimaced at the stubble. "How long?" "Just one night. The fever came fast but broke faster. You're lucky." "Am I?" He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "Ella, what I said when I was fevered." "You don't need to explain." "Don't I?" He swung his legs off the bed, sat facing her. "I asked you to marry me to keep you safe. Told myself that was all. But last night, woman doesn't tend a man through lung fever for convenience. Doesn't stay when he's calling another's name." "You needed help." "I needed you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. "When I woke up and saw you there, thought I was dying and heaven looked like you watching over me." "Callum, let me finish." He stood, still shaky but determined. "I've been a fool. Thought I could keep you at arm's length, protect us both from feeling, but I already feel it. Have since you showed up at my door looking like a drowned cat with more pride than sense." "Despite everything," she laughed. "Drowned cat." "Beautiful drowned cat." He moved closer, careful, like she might spook. "I told myself I was saving you. Truth is, you saved me. From the silence, the emptiness, from turning into a ghost myself. I didn't do anything but show up. Sometimes that's everything." He touched her face, palm warm against her cheek. "I can't promise I'll be easy to live with. Can't promise the ghosts won't come calling. But I can promise to try. To be present, not just standing guard. If that's something you want." She covered his hand with hers. "You know what I want." "Tell me." "Coffee that doesn't taste like tar. A husband who actually sleeps in bed instead of on the floor. Maybe a conversation now and then that doesn't feel like pulling teeth." She smiled at his expression. "Think you can manage that?" "I can try." "Then we'll try together." He kissed her forehead, soft as morning. Not passion, they weren't there yet, but promise, possibility, a future being built one careful piece at a time. "You need food," she said, practical because emotion threatened to overwhelm. "And more rest, real rest, in a real bed." "With my wife." The word sent warmth through her. "If she'll have you. Even after I called you Sarah. Even then." She pushed him gently toward the bed. "But next time you're fevered, try to remember my name. My pride can only take so much." He laughed. First real laugh she'd heard from him. It transformed his face, showed the man he might have been before grief carved lines around his eyes. That night, for the first time, they shared the bed. Nothing improper, he was still weak, and they were still finding their way. But she curled against his side, his arm around her, and felt something settle in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the foundation for it, strong as mountain stone. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent. Inside, the fire crackled and the cabin felt like what it was becoming home. Not just his, not just hers, but theirs, built from necessity, strengthened by trial, warmed by the choice to stay. "I'll remember your name," he murmured against her hair, already drifting back to sleep. "Ella Ridge has a nice sound." It did, she thought. It really did. The town hall meeting was called for Thursday noon, an unusual time that guaranteed the working men could attend. Roy Kendall had been busy in the 2 weeks since Ella's marriage, spreading his poison through every willing ear. Now he stood at the front of the room, holding court like a traveling preacher. "I've come here out of Christian concern," he was saying as Ella and Callum entered. to warn good people about the viper in their midst. Every head turned. The hall was packed loggers, merchants, wives who should have been home preparing dinner, misses. Crane sat front and center, nodding along to Roy's words like gospel. Martha Hartwell stood against the side wall, arms crossed, face thunderous. "Ah, there she is." Roy's smile was all teeth. Mrs. Ridge, as she calls herself now, though the legitimacy of that union is certainly in question. Nothing questionable about it. Reverend Morrison spoke up from his seat. "I performed the ceremony myself, all legal and proper." "Legal, perhaps, but proper—" Roy pulled a paper from his coat. "I have here a sworn statement from Harold Brennan of Lawrence, Kansas, testifying that Miss Carson, Mrs. Ridge, was engaged to him until she assaulted him and fled in the night." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ella felt Callum tense beside her, but she touched his arm. This was her fight. "May I see this statement?" She walked forward, head high. Roy handed it over with a flourish. She read it, almost laughed at the creative fiction Harold had penned. "Interesting. According to this, I attacked him unprovoked in his own home, as witnessed by his mother and myself." Roy confirmed. "In the parlor. It says here." "That's correct. Funny, since Harold was never in his parlor when I was present. His mother didn't allow me past the kitchen, said I wasn't refined enough for the good furniture." She handed the paper back. "If you're going to lie, Mr. Kendall, at least make it believable." "How dare you?" "I dare because it's truth." She faced the crowd, found familiar faces among the suspicious ones. "Yes, I left Kansas quickly. Yes, I was engaged to Harold Brennan, but I left because his cousin—" She pointed at Roy, cornered me in the stable and tried to take liberties. When I defended myself, he swore revenge. "Lies." Roy's face flushed dark. "She's always been loose with her favors. Ask about the stable boy." "Thomas Garrett, 16 years old, mind of a child." Ella's voice rose over his. "He was helping me saddle my horse because Roy had been following me all morning. When Roy found us together, he made vile insinuations about a boy who couldn't even understand them. She threatened me with a pitchfork. After you put your hands on me, after you wouldn't accept no for an answer." She looked at the women in the crowd. "How many of you have known a man who wouldn't listen to no, who thought his wants mattered more than your wishes?" A murmur ran through the assembled women. She saw recognition in some faces, sympathy in others. This is precisely the problem. Roy seized control again. A woman of low character, spreading discord, seducing good men. "That's enough." Callum's voice cut through like an axe through pine. He stepped forward, and men who'd been nodding along to Roy suddenly found the floor interesting. "You've said your piece. Now I'll say mine." "The woodcutter speaks," Roy mocked. "Tell us, Ridge, did she seduce you too? Appear at your door playing helpless?" Callum moved faster than a man his size should. One moment Roy was smirking. The next, he was pressed against the wall, Callum's forearm across his throat. "Callum, no." Ella started forward, but Martha caught her arm. "Let him," the older woman murmured. "Men like Roy only understand one language." "You listen close," Callum said, voice deadly quiet. "That woman is my wife. You speak ill of her again. We'll settle this outside town limits where the law doesn't reach. Understand?" Roy's eyes bulged. He nodded frantically. Callum released him, stepped back. Roy slumped, gasping. "You all saw that?" Roy wheezed. "Assault unprovoked." I saw a husband defending his wife's honor. This from Jake Sullivan, the biggest logging contractor in town. "Nothing wrong with that." "Here, here," several men chorused. But Roy wasn't finished. He straightened his coat, found his oily smile again. "Defending her honor." "What honor?" He reached into his pocket again. I have here a contract for goods purchased by the Brennan family. A wedding dress, shoes, linens, all special ordered from St. Louis, near $200 worth. Ella's heart sank. She'd forgotten about the dress, the preparations Harold's mother had insisted on. Goods ordered for a wedding that never happened. Roy continued. Because the bride fled like a thief, the Brennans demand recompense. Then they should take it up with the court, Martha said. Not air their grievances like fishwives at market? Oh, we intend to, unless... Roy's eyes glittered. Mrs. Ridge agrees to return to Kansas, face her obligations. Harold is still willing to honor the engagement, despite everything. When hell freezes twice over, Ella snapped. Then you'll face legal action, breach of promise, theft of goods. Your husband here will lose everything trying to pay your debts. Callum laughed, surprising everyone. You think I care about money? Every man cares when faced with ruin. Already been ruined once, survived it. Callum pulled something from his own pocket, a leather folder. But, as it happens, won't be necessary. He opened the folder, drew out papers. Bill of sale for the Brennan timber rights to their Kansas property. Purchased through my agent last week. And here, another paper. Receipt for goods from Madame Dubois of St. Louis, paid in full, including one wedding dress, never worn. Roy's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. How did you... I may live simple, but I'm not poor. Years of logging, living modest. It adds up. Callum handed the papers to Reverend Morrison. Everything legal and proper, as you can see. But the timber rights alone are worth more than any dress. Yes. Callum smiled, cold as winter morning. The Brennans were eager to sell. Seems they needed quick money to cover some debts. Your salary among them, I believe. Understanding dawned on Roy's face. You bought me out. You made them... I made them an offer. They took it. Free country. Callum turned to the crowd. Any other business? Because I've got work to get back to. This isn't over. Roy snarled. You think you've won? She'll show her true colors eventually. Women like her always do. And when she runs again... I won't run. Ella stepped forward, found her voice strong. I've done enough running. From men like you who think they're entitled to what isn't freely given. From people who'd rather gossip than help. From my own mistakes. She looked around the room, met every eye. Yes, I left Kansas fast. Yes, I broke an engagement, because staying would have meant marrying a weak man who let his cousin manhandle his intended and did nothing. Would any of you want your daughters to make that choice? Silence. Then Abigail Morse said quietly, No, I wouldn't. Neither would I, said another woman. Then another. I've worked beside Martha Hartwell for 2 months. Ella continued. Helped birth babies, tend wounds, nurse the sick. Judge me on that, not on the word of a man who followed me across territories because I wounded his pride. Pretty speech, Roy spat. But we'll see what... You'll see nothing. Jake Sullivan stood, and his crew stood with him. Big men. Hard men. Men who could break Roy like kindling. Way I see it, you've worn out your welcome in Broken Pine. Stage leaves in an hour. Be on it. You can't run me out of town. Not running you out. Jake's smile was all teeth. Just suggesting you might be more comfortable elsewhere. Lot of accidents in a logging town. Trees fall funny ways sometimes. Roy looked around for support. Found none. Even Mrs. Crane had stopped nodding along, perhaps remembering her own daughter's flight. This is... You can't... 1 hour, Jake repeated. Boys here will help you pack if needed. Roy fled. Dignity in tatters. The hall began to empty. People returning to their lives with fresh gossip to chew over. But now Ella noticed something different, women nodding to her as they passed. Men tipping their hats to Callum with new respect. Well, Martha said, satisfaction rich in her voice. That went better than expected. Did you know? Ella asked. About the timber rights? Callum asked my advice last week. I told him it was too much. He said, "What did you say?" She looked at Callum. "Said a man protects what's his," he answered quietly, "with whatever tools he's got." Outside, snow began to fall again. Ella tucked her hand through Callum's arm as they walked. $200 worth of protection. That's substantial tools. Worth it to see his face. He covered her hand with his, "Besides, the timber rights will pay out over time. Good investment." "Is that what I am, an investment?" He stopped, turned her to face him right there on Main Street. "You're my wife, my choice, my—" He paused, struggle clear on his face. "Your what?" "My heart," he finished soft. "Didn't expect it, didn't look for it, but there it is." She rose on tiptoes, kissed him in the falling snow while the town watched and whispered, "Let them." She was done running, done hiding, done apologizing for surviving. "Home?" he asked when they broke apart. "Home," she agreed. They climbed the mountain trail together, snow erasing their footprints behind them. At the cabin, he added wood to the fire while she started dinner. Simple domestic tasks, but weighted with new meaning. They'd faced the town's judgment together, stood as one, built something worth protecting. That night, as they lay together still learning each other's rhythms, still careful but growing bolder, she said, "Thank you for the timber rights, for standing with me." "Always," he promised. "No more standing alone, either of us." Outside, the wind howled its lonely song, but inside was warm and safe and theirs, a sanctuary built from necessity, strengthened by choice, defended with everything they had. Roy Kendall took the evening stage, bag hastily packed, pride thoroughly crushed. He'd returned to Kansas with tales of wild women and violent men, but no one would pay much attention. The Brennans had their money. Harold would find another bride, one more suitable to his mother's tastes. And in a cabin above Broken Pine, a careful man and a brave woman built their life board by board, day by day, strong enough to weather any storm. Spring came late to the mountains that year, but when it arrived, it transformed everything. Snow melted into rushing streams, bare branches budded green, and the world seemed to exhale after holding its breath all winter. Ella stood on the cabin porch, watching Callum split wood in his shirt sleeves, and felt something similar happening in her chest, a thawing, a blooming, a careful hope taking root. They'd been married 4 months now, 4 months of learning each other's ways, of building routines and rhythms. She still worked with Martha 3 days a week, still faced whispers in town, though they'd gentled to curious rather than cruel. He still went quiet sometimes, still saw ghosts in the fire. But now he reached for her hand when the memories came calling. "Planning to work or just admire the view?" he called without turning around. "Can't a wife appreciate her husband's labors?" He set another log on the block, swung the axe in that easy rhythm she'd never tired of watching. The wood split clean, and he finally looked at her, that half-smile playing at his lips. "Plenty of labor needs doing if you're looking for more to appreciate." She laughed, came down the steps. "Martha gave me the afternoon off. Mrs. Patterson's baby is thriving, and no one's due for weeks." "Good timing, then." He set the axe aside, wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "Wanted to show you something." He led her around the cabin to where he'd been working on something mysterious for days, shooing her away whenever she tried to peek. Now she saw a garden plot, freshly turned earth, dark and rich, bordered with stones he'd hauled from the creek. "Thought you might want to grow things," he said, suddenly shy. "Your grandmother taught you herbs and such. Seemed a shame not to use the knowledge." Her throat tightened. "Callum?" "Already ordered seeds from the catalog. Medicinals mostly, but some vegetables too. And," he pointed to the corner, "thought maybe flowers there. Something pretty to look at." She hadn't cried when Roy tried to drag her back to Kansas. Hadn't cried during the fever night when Callum called for Sarah. But now, looking at this patch of earth he'd prepared for her, tears came hot and sudden. "Hey now." He pulled her against his chest, awkward with comfort but trying. "If you don't like it."
"I love it."
She pressed her face into his shirt, breathed in sawdust and sweat and safety.
"It's just, no one's ever—"
"Ever what?" "Made me a place to grow things." His arms tightened around her. "Well, someone should have." They stood there while her tears soaked his shirt, while the spring sun warmed their backs. When she finally pulled away, he thumbed the wetness from her cheeks with careful fingers. "Better."
"Better."
She surveyed the garden plot with new eyes.
"We'll need to fence it. Deer will eat everything otherwise."
"Already got posts cut. Figure we can work on it together."
Together."
The word still caught her sometimes, sweet as honey on her tongue. They spent the afternoon setting posts, him digging holes while she held the wood straight. The work was hard but satisfying, building something that would last. As the sun slanted lower, he stopped suddenly, looking past her toward the trail. "Someone's coming!" She turned, saw a figure trudging up the path. A woman, bonnet askew, skirts muddy, carrying a valise like it weighed 100 pounds. As she got closer, Ella recognized her Abigail Morse from the boarding house, the school teacher with kind eyes.
"Miss Morse?"
Ella hurried forward.
"What's wrong?"
Abigail's face was tear-streaked, her usually neat appearance thoroughly disheveled.
"Mrs. Ridge, I'm sorry, I didn't know where else. I can't go back to town, can't face them."
"Come inside," Ella said immediately. "Callum, could you—" "I'll get water heating." He was already moving, reading the situation with the instincts of a man who understood trouble. Inside, Ella settled Abigail at the table, poured coffee with hands that remembered another night, another woman seeking shelter. Callum made himself scarce after bringing hot water, murmuring about checking trap lines. "Now," Ella said when Abigail had stopped shaking.
"Tell me." The story came in fits and starts. The school board president, Mr. Hutchins, pillar of the community. His attention that seemed flattering at first, compliments on her teaching, requests for private meetings about curriculum. Then the expectations, the assumptions. The day he'd cornered her in the empty schoolhouse. "I said no,"
Abigail whispered.
"Kept saying no, but he said I'd let him on, said no one would believe me over him. And when I tried to leave, he—"
She touched her wrist, where bruises showed purple beneath her sleeve. Rage rose hot in Ella's throat.
"Did he—"
"No, I hit him with a slate board. Hard. He was bleeding when I ran." Abigail's laugh was hollow. "Assault. That's what they'll call it. Teacher attacks respected citizen. I'll never work again." "You defended yourself." "Who'll believe that his word against mine? And I'm just a spinster who should be grateful for attention." Ella thought of Roy's hands, of Harold's mother's sneers, of all the ways the world tried to make women small. "I believe you, and you'll stay here as long as you need."
"I couldn't impose—"
"It's not imposing. It's what women do for each other." She covered Abigail's hand with hers. "Or should do." Callum returned as dusk fell, took in their guest without surprise. "Set another place for supper," was all he said. But after the meal, he caught Ella's eye, nodded toward the door. She followed him onto the porch. "Hutchins has a reputation," he said quiet. "Other teachers who left sudden, young women who wouldn't say why. And no one's done anything? He's rich, owns half the businesses in town. Who's going to stand against him?" "We are." He studied her face in the fading light.
"This isn't like Roy. Hutchins has real power, real connections, could make things difficult for us."
"More difficult than they've been." "Yes." She thought of Abigail inside, hollow-eyed and scared. Thought of other women who'd run rather than fight because fighting cost too much. "I don't care." "I know you don't." His hand found hers.
Just want you to understand what we're risking.
You think I'd let you stand alone after everything? He squeezed her fingers. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Just want us clear-eyed about it. That night, they made pallets by the fire, gave Abigail the bed. She protested, but Ella remembered another night, another protest, another woman too tired to fight kindness. We'll go to Martha tomorrow. Ella planned aloud. She'll help us figure out next steps. The school board meets Thursday, Abigail said. They'll want to know why I abandoned my position without notice. Then we'll be there. Tell them exactly why. They won't listen. Maybe not, but other women will be listening too. Mothers of daughters. Wives who've known men like Hutchins. Ella felt certainty settle in her bones. Sometimes speaking truth isn't about being believed. It's about being heard. The next days passed in preparation. Martha, fierce as expected, rallied other women, the minister's wife, the banker's daughter, even Mrs. Crane, who'd lost 2 housemaids to Hutchins's attention. They gathered testimony, written in careful hands, sealed with wax and determination. Thursday came gray and threatening rain. The school board meeting was held in the church, ostensibly open to all but traditionally attended only by the 5 board members. This day, the pews were full. Women who should have been baking bread or minding children sat with hands folded and eyes forward. Hutchins sat at the board table, bandage visible on his temple, face arranged in wounded dignity. When he saw Abigail enter with Ella and Callum flanking her, his expression darkened. This is highly irregular, he blustered. Board meetings are not public spectacles. Nothing spectacular about it, Martha said from her front pew. Just community members interested in our school. The board president, elderly Judge Warren, cleared his throat. Well, let's proceed. Miss Morse, you're called to explain your abandonment of duties. Abigail stood, voice shaking but clear. I left because Mr. Hutchins attacked me in my classroom. Gasps, murmurs. Hutchins shot to his feet. Lies, she attacked me. Look at this wound. Received while you were forcing yourself on her, Ella said, standing too. Or do you deny being alone with her in the schoolhouse? I was discussing her performance. Behind a locked door, this from the minister's wife. How thorough of you. These are baseless accusations. Are they? Martha produced the sealed testimonies. We have statements here from 6 women, former teachers, maids, shop girls, all describing similar discussions with Mr. Hutchins. The judge accepted the papers reluctantly. As he read, his face went pale, then red. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. These are serious allegations, the judge said finally. Fabrications, Hutchins snarled. Jealous women seeking attention. One woman might lie, Ella said. Maybe 2, but 6, 7 counting Miss Morse. You! Hutchins turned on her, finger pointing like a weapon. You're behind this. The woman who seduced Ridge, who brought scandal to our town. Careful. Callum's voice was quiet, but it filled the church. Choose your next words very careful. Are you threatening me? I'm reminding you that slander has consequences, legal ones. Callum pulled out papers he'd been busy this week, too. I've taken the liberty of consulting with a lawyer in Denver. These testimonies, combined with evidence of financial irregularities in Mr. Hutchins' businesses, paint an interesting picture. Financial irregularities. The judge leaned forward. Seems when women refuse his advances, their families sometimes find themselves in sudden debt to Hutchins Enterprises. Loans called in early. Rents raised without cause. Callum set the papers before the board. All documented. The meeting devolved into chaos. Hutchins raged, threatened, finally stormed out when it became clear the board was taking the allegations seriously. Abigail was reinstated with apologies. An investigation was promised. Outside, as rain finally began to fall,
Abigail clutched Ella's hands. How can I thank you? By staying, by teaching, by being here when the next woman needs help. Ella smiled through her own tears. That's how we change things. One woman standing up, then another, then another. That night, back in their cabin, Callum pulled Ella close in their bed. Proud of you, he murmured against her hair. I didn't do much. The women were ready to speak. They just needed someone to go first. You went first, back in that store with Roy. Showed them it could be done. She turned in his arms, found his face in the darkness. I was terrified. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right despite the fear. Speaking from experience. Every day, he kissed her forehead. Every day I wake up next to you. I choose not to let fear win. Choose to believe this is real, lasting. That's my courage. She kissed him then, deep and sure. They'd built something here, not just a marriage or a home, but a place where women could flee to, where men stood beside instead of over, where truth could be spoken even when hands shook and voices wavered. The garden would grow come summer, the fence would hold, and in a cabin above broken pine, two wounded people continued healing each other, one brave day at a time. The autumn moon hung low and golden, casting long shadows across the cabin floor. Ella sat by the window, mending one of Callum's shirts by lamplight, trying to ignore the strange fluttering in her belly that had been plaguing her all week. Across the room, he worked on sharpening tools, preparing for the winter logging season. You're quiet tonight, he observed, not looking up from his work. Just thinking. Dangerous occupation. She smiled despite her nervousness. They'd been married 8 months now. 8 months of building a life together plank by plank. The garden had yielded well herbs drying in the rafters, vegetables stored in the root cellar. The town had settled into acceptance of them, especially after the Hutchins scandal ended with him leaving for California in disgrace. Callum. I need to tell you something. Now he did look up, gray eyes immediately alert. He set down the whetstone, crossed to her. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think. She set aside the mending, took his hands. They were rough, calloused, steady. I'm late. Late for what? Despite everything, she laughed. My monthly time. I'm late, and I've been sick in the mornings, and Martha says... Understanding dawned on his face, followed by something she couldn't read. Fear, joy. Both. You're carrying... I think so. Martha's almost certain. She watched his face carefully. I know we haven't talked about children. I know after Sarah and your daughter... Stop. He squeezed her hands tight. Just give me a moment. He stood, paced to the door and back, ran his hands through his hair. She waited, heart hammering. They'd never discussed this possibility. Both too caught up in the present to plan for a future that might include a child. Finally, he knelt before her chair, eyes level with hers. You're sure? As sure as I can be without time telling. His hand hovered over her still flat belly, not quite touching. May I? She guided his palm to rest against her. His hand was warm through the fabric of her dress, gentle as she'd ever felt it. I failed them before, he said quietly. Sarah, the baby, wasn't there when they needed me. This is different. Is it? He looked up at her, and she saw all his fears written plain. What if I'm gone when the time comes? What if something happens and I can't? Then I'll manage until you get back. Women have been having babies since Eve, Callum, and I'm stronger than Sarah was. I know you are. That's not... He took a breath. I'm scared. Ella, scared of loving another child and losing them. Scared of not being enough. She touched his face, felt the slight tremor in his jaw. I'm scared too, but isn't that part of it, being scared and choosing to hope anyway? He turned his face into her palm. kissed it soft. When did you get so wise? Must be all that mountain air. They sat together in the lamplight, his hand still resting on her belly, both adjusting to this new reality. Finally, he asked, "What do you need? What can I do?" "Just be here, that's all." "I can do that." He rose, pulled her up with him, into his arms. "I can definitely do that." That night in bed, he curled around her protective as a wolf with its mate. "A baby," he murmured into her hair. "Our baby." "Does that mean you're happy about it?" "Happy, terrified, grateful." He pressed closer. "All of it at once." "Good, then we match." The next weeks passed in preparation. He started work on a cradle, spending evening hours carving and sanding until the wood was smooth as silk. She sewed tiny clothes from scraps, let out her dresses, tried to imagine their life with a third soul in it. Martha confirmed what Ella suspected late spring arrival if all went well. "You're healthy as a horse," the older woman declared. "Stop fretting." But fretting seemed to be what Callum did best these days. He watched her like she might break, tried to stop her from lifting anything heavier than a teacup. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she told him one afternoon when he tried to carry the water bucket for the third time. "Humor me. You're going to be insufferable for 9 months, aren't you?" "Probably." But he smiled when he said it. That new soft smile she'd noticed since learning about the baby. Then came the night everything shifted. She woke to cramping, sharp and wrong. Reached for Callum, found empty space. He was on night watch at the lumber camp. Wouldn't be back until dawn. She stood, felt wetness on her thighs. Even in the dark, she knew it was blood. "No," she whispered to the empty cabin. "No, please." She managed to light a lamp, saw what she feared confirmed. Too much blood. The cramping worse now, doubling her over. She knew what this was. Had helped Martha through it with other women, but knowing didn't make it easier. She cleaned herself as best she could, changed into fresh clothes, stuffed rags between her legs to catch the flow. The pain came in waves, each one stealing her breath. She should go to town, find Martha, but walking 3 miles like this, in the dark. Instead, she built up the fire and waited, watched the window for dawn, for Callum's return. Tried not to think about the tiny clothes folded in the drawer, the half-finished cradle in the corner. He came with first light, whistling until he saw her by the fire, saw her face. "Ella, I lost it." The words came out flat, empty. "The baby, I lost it in the night." His face went white. He crossed to her in 3 strides, gathered her up. "We need Martha." "It's done. Nothing she can do now." She let herself lean into his strength. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry," he pulled back to see her face. "What could you possibly be sorry for?" "I couldn't keep it safe. Couldn't—" "Stop!" His voice was fierce. "This isn't your fault. These things happen. Martha's told us that." "But you were so happy about the cradle. About—" "I'm happy about you. You're what matters." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, tasted salt. "We'll get through this. Together." Martha came anyway, summoned by Callum despite Ella's protests. She confirmed what Ella knew early loss. Nothing to be done but rest and heal. 1 in 4, Martha said gently. "Maybe more. Doesn't mean anything for next time." Next time. Ella couldn't imagine next time, not with this emptiness echoing inside her. The following days blurred together. Callum took time from work. Wouldn't leave her alone. She found him once standing over the unfinished cradle, shoulders shaking. But when she touched him, he just gathered her close and they grieved together. Silent. Slowly, life resumed its rhythm. She returned to work with Martha, he to the lumber camp, but something had shifted between them. The loss had carved them both hollow, but in the hollow space, something new grew. Deeper understanding, fiercer protection.
Love that had been tested by hope and grief and survived both. One evening, as early snow began to fall, she found him working on the cradle again. "What are you doing?" "Finishing it." He didn't look up. "Want it ready?"
Callum, not giving up. Ella, not on this, not on us, not on the family we'll have someday. Now he did look at her, eyes bright with determination. That baby was real, deserves to have their cradle finished, even if... She went to him then, wrapped her arms around him from behind. "I love you," she whispered against his back. "I don't say it enough. You say it every day, in how you look at me, how you stand beside me, how you make this empty cabin a home." He turned in her arms. "I love you too, more than I knew I could love anyone again." They stood together in the lamplight, snow falling soft outside, the cradle waiting between them, symbol of loss but also of hope, of the faith that some dreams were worth the risk of breaking. "Just sleep, no trouble," she murmured, echoing that long-ago first night. "Plenty of trouble," he corrected softly. "The best kind." That night, they loved each other with new tenderness, understanding that joy and sorrow were sides of the same coin, that building a life together meant risking loss but choosing to build anyway. The cradle stood finished in the corner, waiting, and in the cabin above Broken Pine, two people who'd learned that love meant more than safety continued to choose each other, one fragile, precious day at a time. Winter settled over Broken Pine like a familiar blanket, and with it came a peace Ella hadn't expected to find again. A year had passed since she'd lost the baby, a year of healing, of careful hope rebuilt day by day. She stood at the window of the small sewing shop Martha had helped her open on Main Street, watching snow fall on the town that had become home. The bell above the door chimed. She turned to find Abigail Morse entering, cheeks pink from cold, carrying a basket. "3 more orders for spring dresses," Abigail announced, setting the basket on the counter. "Seems every woman in town wants something made by the notorious Ella Ridge." "Former notorious," Ella corrected with a smile. "Now I'm almost respectable." "Almost is better than entirely. Entirely respectable is boring." Abigail's eyes sparkled. She'd flourished since the Hutchins incident, becoming a voice for women's concerns in town, still teaching but no longer afraid. The door opened again, bringing a swirl of snow and Callum, who had to duck to enter the small shop. His presence filled the space, made it feel warmer somehow. "Ladies," he nodded to Abigail, but his eyes were on Ella. "Martha sent me. Says you're needed at the Garrison place." "The baby." "Coming fast. She's already there but wants your hands too." Ella grabbed her medical bag, always ready now. As she pinned on her cloak, Callum caught her chin, tilted her face up. "Be careful riding. Snow's getting deep." "I've ridden in worse." "I know. Still." He kissed her quick but thorough, not caring that Abigail was watching with undisguised delight. The Garrison birth went smooth, a healthy boy. 6th son for a family that cherished each one. Riding back through the falling snow, Ella felt the satisfaction of work well done, of being needed, of having found her place. At home, and how easily she thought of the cabin as home now she found Callum had supper waiting. Simple fare, but hot and filling. They ate in companionable silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone so well words aren't always necessary. "Good day," he asked finally. "Very good. The shop's thriving. The Garrisons have their baby, and I get to come home to you." Sweet talker. But he smiled, that full smile she'd worked so hard to earn and now saw daily. After supper, they sat by the fire, her mending, him reading aloud from a book of poetry, a new habit they'd developed. His voice rumbled through verses about love and loss and the turning of seasons. And she thought how far they'd come from that first night when she'd knocked on his door seeking shelter. When bedtime came, she changed into her nightgown, a proper one now, not his old shirt, though she still kept that tucked away for sentimental reasons. As she brushed out her hair, she watched him in the mirror, saw him watching her with that look that still made her breath catch. Callum. I'm late again. His hands stilled on the button he was unfastening. In the mirror, she saw hope and fear war across his face. How late? 2 months, and Martha checked today, after the Garrison birth. She turned to face him. I'm carrying again. He crossed to her in 2 strides, then stopped, hands hovering like he was afraid to touch. You're sure? As sure as we can be. And you feel you're well? I'm well, scared, but well. Scared. He finally touched her, hands gentle on her shoulders. That makes 2 of us. But hopeful too. That too. He pulled her close, held her like she was spun glass. We'll be careful, take no chances. I'll stay close to home. You'll do no such thing. We need the money from winter logging, and I won't be wrapped in cotton. She pulled back to see his face. We'll be sensible, but we won't live in fear. That's no way to welcome a child. He studied her face, then nodded slowly. You're right, as usual. Just sleep, no trouble, she teased, echoing their old refrain. Woman, you've been nothing but trouble since day 1. But he was smiling as he said it, that slow smile that transformed his careful face. Best kind of trouble. They went to bed together, curved around each other, and the secret growing between them. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white silence. The months that followed were careful ones, but not fearful. Ella continued her work at the shop and with Martha, adjusting as her body changed. Callum finished not just 1 cradle, but 2 in case, he said, though neither voiced what in case might mean. Spring came early that year, melting snow into rushing streams, coaxing green from sleeping earth, and on a morning when the dogwood bloomed outside their window, their daughter arrived small but fierce, with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. They named her Sarah, not for the ghost, but for the continuity, the connection between past and present and future. She was baptized in the church where her parents had married in desperate circumstances and now stood together in joy. She's perfect, Callum whispered that first night, holding his daughter like he'd never held anything so precious. How is she so perfect? Takes after her mother, Ella said from the bed, exhausted but radiant. Heaven help us then, another stubborn woman in the house. You wouldn't have it any other way. No, he agreed, settling beside her with Sarah cradled between them. I wouldn't. The town, which had once whispered scandal about them, now brought gifts, blankets, and clothes and preserved food. Even Mrs. Crane, that guardian of propriety, knitted a cap for dear little Sarah. One evening, when Sarah was 3 months old and already ruling their lives with her demands and smiles, Ella found herself again at the window where this story began. But now she wasn't watching snow fall on an uncertain world. She was watching her husband walk up the path, returning from town with supplies, stopping to split wood even though they had plenty because he liked the rhythm of it. He looked up, caught her watching, smiled that smile she'd earned through patience and pain and stubborn love. Inside, Sarah cooed from her cradle, and Ella thought how different this was from what she'd fled in Kansas. Not the life others had planned for her, but the one she'd built with her own hands and heart. Callum came in, stamped snow from his boots, crossed to kiss her with cold lips that quickly warmed. Good day, she asked, their evening ritual. Good day. Jake Sullivan wants to expand the lumber operation. Offered me a partnership. That's wonderful. Means more time away, longer hours. We'll manage. I know. He touched her face, gentle as always. Just want to be here, with you and Sarah. Keep missing things when I'm gone. Then we'll make the moments you're here count double. That night, as they lay together with Sarah sleeping between them, she'd fussed until they brought her to their bed.
Callum said quietly. Thank you. For what? For knocking on my door that night. For not giving up when I tried to push you away. For showing me life was worth living again.
Thank you for opening the door,
she whispered back.
For giving me shelter and then so much more.
Just sleep, no trouble, he murmured, their private joke now worn smooth as riverstone.
Just sleep,
she agreed, though they both knew their lives would never be without trouble, without risk, without the possibility of loss. But they'd learned that was living not the absence of trouble, but the courage to face it together. In a cabin above broken pine, a careful man and a brave woman had built something worth defending, worth fighting for, worth opening their door to whatever storm might come. And in her cradle, one of two, built with hope and fear and determination, Sarah Ridge slept peaceful, dreaming baby dreams, while snow began to fall again outside, soft as promises, gentle as the love that surrounded her. This was their happily ever after, not perfect, not without scars, but real and true, and theirs, a family forged from necessity, strengthened by choice, bound by the daily decision to keep choosing each other. And somewhere in the distance, a door stood ready to open for the next soul seeking shelter, because that's what love does. It opens doors, builds rooms, makes space for more. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story, dear listeners. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying Just Sleep, No Trouble, whether you're cozy at home, on your daily commute, or perhaps winding down for the night. Please share your thoughts and let me know in the comments below where in the world you're listening from. If you enjoyed this tale of love and redemption in the Old West, please consider subscribing to Wild West Stories 1850 for more heartfelt stories from America's frontier days. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more people discover Ella and Callum's journey. Your support means the world and helps these stories reach fellow lovers of historical romance and Western tales. Until next time, partners.